All right, so here's the topic everybody's been waiting for. Why Elon is wrong about Bitcoin and energy use. So we have point, counterpoint. Richard Clark was actually at my first ever speaking, like this kind of speaking presentation ever. He runs Bitcoin Atlanta. So we have a organizer up in the Georgia area if you want to join a really great group. Richard's doing an amazing job. But let's give Richard a round of applause. Richard, come on up, my friend. It's all yours.
All right. Is this thing on? All right, great. All right, so this is a big topic. I'm going to be going real fast because there's tons of information and not very much time to give it to you. So why Elon's wrong about it. First of all, I want to say, I'm not a hater on Elon. I love, I actually went to grad school for a little while for aerospace engineering, so I'm a big space geek. I have a Tesla Cybertruck on pre-order. See on my shirt here. But maybe that'll change. Who knows? But Elon, as we know, he made a tweet earlier this month. It was May 12th, okay? It said, Tesla has suspended vehicle purchases using Bitcoin. We are concerned about rapidly increasing use of fossil fuels for Bitcoin mining and transactions, especially coal, which has the worst emissions of any fuel. Cryptocurrency is a good idea on many levels, and we believe it has a promising future, but this cannot come at a great cost to the environment. Tesla will not be selling any Bitcoin because Tesla invested in Bitcoin earlier in the year. They put $1.5 billion into Bitcoin. And we intend to use it for transactions as soon as mining transitions to more sustainable energy. We're looking at other cryptocurrencies that use less than 1% of Bitcoin's energy. This caused a big fervor of outrage at Bitcoin and Bitcoin's energy use. And it's permeated everywhere. Chris was even telling me he was getting flack on Twitter for supporting NFTs, which apparently use a lot of energy too, at this conference talking about NFTs. So there's a lot of people now up in arms. It's been an issue for years, though. People have talked about it for years, this Bitcoin energy use. Just like 3 days ago, Anonymous came out and posted a video to Elon saying, hey, Elon, it's not cool what you're doing, manipulating these markets. And they even mentioned that the whole crypto and energy use thing is very nuanced. And so I'm here to maybe provide some of the nuances. What is Bitcoin? So we do some high-level stuff here. What's Bitcoin mining as it pertains to energy? So Bitcoin utilizes proof of work, which was first developed in the early 1990s. It was an idea to prevent email spam, so network spam. Basically, it does that by requiring a certain amount of energy to be used, computing power, to send a piece of information. This makes spamming the network too costly to do at large scale. So what Satoshi Nakamoto did is he combined proof of work with peer-to-peer file sharing to create the first decentralized form of human consensus ever to exist. And so in this model, work done by the winning miner permits them to broadcast new information to the network, and the peer-to-peer nodes can all independently validate the information is valid in real time. So some broad points about energy. Electrical energy is expensive to transport, both infrastructure costs and maintenance, and transmission losses as well. So this is why, Nevada will sell energy to California, but not sell it to, say, Florida, right? It's just too far for the energy to travel. This limits power consumption to localized regions geographically close to the generation source. Electrical energy, which is generated and not consumed, is wasted and typically cannot be stored, okay? So if you have a power plant that's generating energy in surplus of what the grid is demanding, that energy essentially is just wasted. So that coal that's burned, that gas that's burned, the hydro that runs across the turbines, it's just wasted energy. This is another big one. Electrical grid loads vary greatly with the time of year and even the time of day. So, of course, in Florida, in the summertime, you're going to be using a lot more, air conditioning and all those types of things. A lot more energy is used during the day than at night. Power plants must be ramped up and down to meet high demand, and even shut down sometimes when the demand's low. And depending on the type of plant, the ramping up and shutting down can take several hours or even days. It's a little hyperbolic, but it's true. Like a nuclear power plant takes days to cool down after it's been shut down. During these times, there can be power shortages or even overages, and this is what causes some of the rolling blackouts in places like California. So Bitcoin's bad for my Earth because it uses a lot of energy. So these are the big questions we're going to be asking during this presentation. So compared to what? So I figure a good example, since Elon's kind of at the center of this, is let's talk a little bit about his goals with the electric car. So this is the United States energy consumption, energy by source. Petroleum is that big red one. 37% of the energy used in the United States is petroleum, and that's mostly for transportation. So Elon's goal is to take that big red slice and just shrink it down to almost nothing. And his goal is to move it to this sector, which is the U.S. electrical grid. Okay, on this grid we have oil only being used 1%. It's a tiny red sliver at the top. And the majority of our power in the United States comes from natural gas and coal. So he's trying to shrink the petroleum one and fit it into this pie. So this is just a map of the power plants in the United States. So it's hard to tell the colors on the screen, but I'll filter it out a little for you. So these are all coal plants in the United States. So they're spread out all around. And these are your gas-fired plants. These are by far the majority of plants in the United States. If we go back to the first slide here, you see there's a lot of hydro on the west coast. And there's some also kind of in the southeast. The thing about electric cars is they have to be charged where they're at. Okay? So that you can't send your electric car to Seattle for the day to be charged and then have it come back. So you don't charge from coal. And by the way, in Florida basically is all gas, oil, energy. Okay, so Florida's energy provision, I think there's like 2 nuclear plants in Florida, but mostly Florida is all going to be sort of carbon-sourced energy production. So if you're driving a Tesla right now in Florida, you're running it on, carbon. So this is the big thing about Bitcoin. It's chasing efficiency. Okay. Bitcoin can be mined anywhere in the world. It doesn't care. So Bitcoin seeks the lowest possible power prices and can be located anywhere on the earth that there's internet. And thanks, Elon, for Starlink. Maybe that'll make that a little easier if the latencies are low enough. So areas with low power rates typically have abundant power resources, so or heavy government subsidies. So basically, if you have cheaper power, that's because there's some abundant power resource nearby. So for instance, like in China, we'll go over China a little later, many miners actually move south and north to the Mongolia regions where there's a lot of hydropower in the summertime for the rainy season. So you actually, sometime in late spring, you see a dip in mining power as these miners are actually physically shut down and moved to where the cheaper power is because of there's hydro surpluses in the rainy season in China. Real quick, there's this cost per transaction fallacy that's been put out. This guy named Alex DeVries, he's a data scientist at the Dutch Central Bank, which makes him an evil villain right off the gate. He estimates that each Bitcoin transaction requires an average of 300 kilograms of carbon dioxide. That's equivalent to the carbon footprint produced by roughly 750,000 Visa swipes. But Visa, what is Visa? It's just a payment channel built on top of the US dollar and other fiat currencies. It's just one payment channel. Bitcoin is the currency and the payment channel. It's the whole thing in one. So it's not a fair comparison, really, to just compare like one payment channel to an entire currency base. So if you want to say compared to what? So what's the cost of the US petrodollar? And the dollar is literally backed by oil and faith in the US government. And at the end of the day, it's also backed by the US military, which emits more carbon dioxide than many nations on its own. So, I wore this shirt. This is a ridiculous meme shirt from a Based Money, but somebody commented, is it saying that Tesla is dollar-based? And it's like, yeah, that's right, Tesla's dollar-based. So they're bragging about not doing Bitcoin, but they're literally tied to the petrodollar. This came out, I think, in February, that Bitcoin uses more energy than Argentina And so just because something uses a lot of energy, does that make it bad? Okay, this is something humans should ask about anything. So according to the U.S. Department of Energy, increased electrification across all sectors of the economy could boost national consumption as much as 38% by 2050. So we're going to be using more energy no matter what. They also said that a large majority of this is because of electric cars. Okay? So electric cars are going to be using a lot more energy, but of course they're not bad. Well, according to most people. So back to this chart. This is the U.S. energy consumption. So that little blue sliver in the top is solar. It's 1% of the nation's power generation. We got wind 6%, hydro 7.1%, nuclear. So the U.S. is adding hydropower, but it's at a pretty slow rate because a lot of hydropower plants are getting shut down. Nuclear power plants. I live in Georgia. It's the only state in the union that's adding nuclear capacity. Mostly in the United States, nuclear power plants are getting shut down, way more than they're being started up. So what's going to catch this demand is going to be these big slices of pie. Solar can increase, but and wind can increase to a certain degree, but when these electric cars are coming online, it's these hydrocarbon sources that are basically necessary to run these things. Another big point I was talking about ramping on and off power. So this is just an excerpt from an article. In California, for example, the worry is not so much with the state's overall power capacity, but rather the ability to ramp up production when demand is high. This is from Sandy Louie, which is a media relations manager for the California Energy Commission. So they have all kinds of schemes they're trying to work out for electric cars. Like one idea they have is, say you get home at 3 o'clock. They have like a smart meter, a smart charging station where you plug it in, and it doesn't actually start charging your car until 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. when the power gets more cheap and more available. However, I mean, that sounds great, but if you get a call from your buddies and they're like, hey, let's go out, and you go out to your car that's been plugged in for 3 hours and it's still dead, it's not the most convenient thing in the world. So they're trying to come up with all these schemes to figure out how to manage this energy increase that's going to set to happen with electric cars. There's a company in New York called Greenidge, and they actually bought a power plant. It's a private company. They bought a power plant, and they actually built a mining facility right next to the power plant. And so they say that 25% of our overall capacity is dedicated to mining. Then the rest we use for selling power to the grid. And when they need power for the grid, they just ramp down the miners and send more power to the grid. So they said, so prior to Bitcoin mining, it would take us 12 hours to start up and put a megawatts on the grid in periods of high demand. But now we can ramp up to 100 megawatt full capacity within 1 hour. So this provides additional stability to the grid as well as mining Bitcoin. All right, so the elephant in the room, China. Everybody talks about China and how you use coal and coal plants, and it's terrible, and the world's going to end. So this is 2020 data, but they were 65% of the global hash rate for Bitcoin, which is huge. But that is actually down from 2019, where it was 72%. Here's some little known facts about China's energy grid. China leads the world in deployment of hydropower with roughly 28% of the global hydropower capacity. At the end of 2018, China had roughly 352 gigawatts of hydropower. China's hydropower capacity is more than 3 times that of any other nation. For instance, the U.S. only has 80 gigawatts. China is also leading the world in new hydropower construction. In 2018, China installed 8 gigawatts of new hydropower capacity, and the U.S. has only added 1.6 gigawatts from 2010 to 2019, by comparison. And then also, China has overbuilt massively for whatever reason. It's government make-work projects are just trying to plan for the future. But at the end of 2014, the average reserve margin for China as a whole country was 28%. That means that they have 28% more capacity than they need. But it's even crazier than that in certain provinces. For instance, Xinjiang province has over 60% reserve capacity. And Xinjiang province, not surprisingly, supplies 35% of the hash power for China. And this is where there's hydro here, but it's actually predominantly coal. There's huge amounts of coal and coal mines in this province, and that's why it accounts for most of the supply. But if you go down to Sichuan province, which provides 10%, and then we also have Yunnan province. If you look at this map's not as intuitive as the other because it doesn't have blue as hydro, but the yellow dots are actually the hydro plants. So you see it's all hydro basically down there, and the teal ones are coal, and the green ones are gas. So they have a ton of coal. There's also the blue, it's hard to tell on the screen, but up in the north side, there's lots of blue. That's wind power. They have a ton of wind power up there. So a lot of the Bitcoin mining that happens in China, it actually happens on hydropower. Not a majority, not right now, but that's something nobody talks about, of course. Interestingly, also, a newly published regional report shows that China's hash rate lightly has dropped to 55%, while the U.S. has gained to 11%. So another study predicts it may be possible that North America could overtake China by the end of this year, which is kind of crazy. I don't think that's going to happen, but it was an interesting prediction. Much of the newly added hash power is in North America. So this kind of brings up another point that it's a very fluid industry. Like, things can change. And there's a lot of churn, and there's different reasons why, say, China has become so dominant, and for different reasons that it may not be dominant in the future. Chinese coal mining and plant accidents may exacerbate this shift from east to west. They just had a flood in a coal mine that upset a lot of stuff, and an explosion in a coal-fired plant that actually caused the Bitcoin hash rate to drop significantly. This is a nuanced point, but nearly all Bitcoin mining hardware is made in China, which in the past has given them a huge advantage, because in the past these mining machines were getting like orders of magnitude better with each generation. And so whoever was closest to that technology would benefit the most. But now we're reaching the physical limitations of what the ASIC chips can do. And so the efficiency gains are just in the single-digit percentage points per year. And so this advantage to China may be diminishing some. Now it's just about adding more units. And so the United States particularly seems to be adding a lot more units. This is from Cambridge University, released this study. So as you can see, Bitcoin, which is the yellow, Bitcoin power use, which is the yellow line there, is going up. And this, Elon actually tweeted this. It's right after he tweeted that tweet I showed you earlier to show, this is very concerning, it's going up. Is this a feature or a bug? This is another big question, all right? That it uses a lot of power. So is this a problem, as everybody in the world thinks, or is it actually a feature? So I want to go into a little philosophical, thing right now. So what makes a Stradivarius violin worth 10 times more than one made by a contemporary master? Does anybody have any ideas? Everybody ever heard of a Stradivarius violin? Everybody know what that is? Okay. Stradivarius, it was brothers that lived in the Renaissance, so the 16th, 17th century, and they made great violins. And back then and now they're worth millions each. And people have done all kinds of studies to recreate them. They've X-rayed them, made the exact shapes, 3D modeled them, and it just can't be done. And they say it's just because of the fine craftsmanship and the time that has passed, and the way it's aged and patinaed together. And so another question, and I'll get to the point here in a second. Why is gold relatively scarce in the Earth's crust and the universe in general? It's scarce because gold is only created, theoretically, but we're pretty sure about this. It was created some at the Big Bang, so when the universe first came into existence. And then after that, gold was only created when supergiant stars collapse and go supernova. At that exact moment, that's when gold is able to be created, okay? So it's a huge amount of energy. About the same time they were making Stradivarius violins, there were alchemists trying to turn lead into gold, and of course they couldn't do it because it required the energy of a supernova star. So these things are costly due to either their original cost or the improbability of their history. And it's difficult to spoof this costliness. So it's difficult to spoof a Stradivarius. It's difficult to spoof gold. Okay? This is called unforgeable costliness. So Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, because it consumes so much energy, you know, this whole weekend or during this week, people talked about, hey, we need to use the blockchain for this. The blockchain's immutable. We need to record this in the blockchain so people can go back in years later and see that, hey, it's still here. You know, you want to put this on the blockchain, that on the blockchain, so it's immutable. Why is it immutable? Why isn't it just a regular database? It's immutable because of this huge amount of energy that's used to create the Bitcoins. And I want you to imagine, like, if you're talking about a traditional asset like gold, how it's been secured for the entirety of human history is it's been with big, thick walls and guards, you know? So if you have valuable assets, you put up big walls and you put them guards. Well, of course, in this digital age, you know, I've had my credit card skimmed like 5 times at gas stations, and you know, cybersecurity hacks are happening all the time. We're in a different age where big, thick walls don't help you anymore. So if you just want to imagine that with each block that Bitcoin's adding to the blockchain, that's adding a bunch of energy to this equation. It's building a higher and higher wall against rewriting the transaction history of Bitcoin, which AKA means stealing your money or changing history. It's unforgeably costly to do it. So all these other protocols that are not using proof of work, you know, they have other mechanisms, and they may prove to be viable consensus mechanisms in the future. But as of now, what we have now with proof of work, it's the most innovative and most secure way to form this consensus. And other protocols that don't have such a high unforgeable costliness, they may suffer in the future. All right, so I want to tell a little story about Iceland and its trapped energy. So Iceland has a population of, you know, just over 350,000 people. In Metro Atlanta, where I live, there's like 5 major metro counties that are kind of the core of Atlanta. I don't think any single one of those counties has less than that many people in it. So this is a very small population. They consume 7 times more power than the average EU citizen because it's so abundant and cheap. And it's all hydro and geothermal. So it's the dream. They have all renewable resources. But the thing is, there's only 350,000 people to use it. So it's trapped on the island. In the 70s, they talked about maybe running some pipeline, or not pipelines, but cable to Ireland to transmit the energy, some high voltage lines. But in the end, what they decided to do is now 71% of Iceland's power goes towards aluminum production. So the smelting companies import bauxite, which is the raw material for aluminum, you know, from U.S., Ireland, Australia, and then bauxite is not even mined. It's not even mined at all in Iceland. But they came up with a solution to this abundant energy problem. So Iceland basically uses aluminum, because it's a very energy-intensive process to smelt bauxite into aluminum, as a battery to store its power and then export it out. So it's resources sort of as a battery. And the entire world benefits from this abundant energy in the form of cheaper and more available aluminum for other products like electric cars. So naturally, Bitcoin mining operations began moving to Iceland in 2013 or 2012. There's still a lot of mining that happens there, but as a percentage of the global supply, it's down to, I think, below 1%. But estimated of 8% of all Bitcoins in existence today, because a lot of mining was done early on, was from Iceland. So that's all renewable power. And it would have been wasted, potentially, power, right? Because all that power capacity, if it's not being used, it's just wasted. So here's another, this is actually an article, and all my articles I have up here, I did these QR codes, so if you want to take a picture of the screen, it should take you to the article so you can read the whole article. But this is an article from ARK Finance, how Bitcoin mining could yield more renewable energy, providing for more reliable power. This is ARK Finance, by the way, they own $2 billion in Tesla stock. So they're not like they're on Elon's radar. Elon knows about ARK Finance, and ARK Finance comments on Tesla a lot. They do a lot of articles about price predictions and whatnot. So in this article, they say, critics, of course, assert that the computation required to secure Bitcoin is environmentally damaging and ruining the planet. We believe the opposite is true. A world with Bitcoin is a world that, at equilibrium, generates more electricity from renewable carbon-free sources. The real-world data we seek to demonstrate in this article that Bitcoin mining could encourage investment in solar energy systems, enabling renewables to generate higher percentages of grid power with no change in cost of electricity. With the solar industry, the problem is, one, there's supply problems. You have to make enough solar panels to basically take over a huge chunk of the demand for energy in the United States. But also, it's dollars and cents. That's what it all comes down to, folks. I mean, the carbon sources are way cheaper than going to solar, and they're more reliable. So Elon's trying to fix the reliability problem with batteries, we've turned out the power wall and things like that, so that during the day when you are generating more power than you need, it stores it in the battery, and then when at night you can discharge the battery and have power, So the way that this works is the Bitcoin miner allows the solar developer to more efficiently overpower the system with solar, allowing the miners to soak up excess energy and power down the miners to accommodate periods of increased demand or patchier sun. Increased Bitcoin mining capacity allows energy providers to overbuild solar without wasting energy. In the absence of Bitcoin mining, their models suggest that renewables can satisfy only 40% of the grid's needs. Including Bitcoin mining, solar and batteries can satisfy 99% of the grid's demands, is the estimate. They talk a lot about the lithium-ion battery production is kind of the bottleneck in this whole revolution that Elon's trying to create. And that's why he built all these gigafactories to make, in China and Europe and Texas to build all these the batteries for these, and he can't keep up. And so the Powerwall batteries are taking away supply from the electric cars, and so meeting the supply is hard. So these guys are basically saying that instead of batteries, or in addition to batteries, you use the Bitcoin resource as a battery. It's a way to offset costs of adding solar electricity, and more importantly, it allows somebody to say overbuild capacity beyond what they've needed. For the grid at the time, they can overbuild the solar and then just immediately use it for mining, and then it's profitable. And then as they need it, as it's needed by the grid, they just turn miners off. All right, so real quick, just wrapping up because I'm almost out of time. What I'd like to say to Elon is, hey Elon, Bitcoin is helping you add capacity and make more robust and responsive the electrical grid your cars will need, and also liberating humanity from the scourges of fiat money at the same time. So, and then my final thing is kind of a stab at Elon and kind of why he maybe did this. It's high time that there was a carbon tax. He tweeted a couple days after that first tweet, May 13th, 5 o'clock. And then a few minutes later he said, to be clear, I strongly believe in crypto, but it can't drive massive increases in fossil fuel use, especially coal. In that article that says Bitcoin consumes more electricity than Argentina, there's a researcher, this guy, David Gerard, he wrote an article called Attack of the 50-Foot Blockchain. Elon Musk, in the bottom, he says, has thrown away a lot of Tesla's good work promoting energy transition. Mr. Gerard said, this is very bad. I don't know how he could walk this back effectively. Tesla got $1.5 billion in environmental subsidies in 2020 funded by the taxpayers, and they turned around and bought $1.5 billion in Bitcoin, which is mostly mined with electricity from coal. Not necessarily. Their subsidy needs to be examined. A carbon tax on cryptocurrencies could be introduced to balance out some of the negative consumption Mr. Gerard suggested. So I think that part of this is him walking back because he doesn't want to lose these subsidies. And then also, Tesla's biggest profit driver could be driving up, and that is selling carbon credits, just from last month. Since 2008, Tesla has reported cumulative credit sales worth $4.4 billion, with $2.9 billion of that coming since 2019. And there's a graph that shows the blue is their carbon credit sales. And then the red is their actual car sales. Or sorry, the black is their car sales. It's interesting that Elon is asking for carbon credit, carbon taxes on Bitcoin miners now. And here's an article from just a few days ago that same power company I was telling you about, they were going to add another plant to their thing. It was a coal-fired plant. They were going to convert it to gas and do more Bitcoin mining. And they just announced that they're going to be, as of June 1st, buying carbon credits to offset their carbon costs. So I wonder where they're going to get that from. Maybe companies like Tesla. So that's me. My name is Rich Clark. Here's my kind of socials. And I'm way out of time. I'm 2 minutes over. So I appreciate you guys listening. And I'm going to give it back to Chris.
Let's give Richard Clark a round of applause. Great job, Rich.
All right, hope you enjoyed that. I just wanted to drive home a little more of that point at the end about Tesla's carbon credits drying up. You know, it says in there that Chrysler has bought, for the last several years, $500 million in carbon credits from Tesla. And they announced Chrysler announced Q1 this year that they're carbon neutral. They're not going to be buying carbon credits from Tesla anymore. So I think it's interesting, coincidental, that at the same time, Elon's kind of pushing out this narrative of how dirty Bitcoin is. And again, this isn't a new narrative, but nobody's been able to push it out into the public eye like Elon has and make a big issue of it. And so I just think it's interesting that his company, which as we saw, makes more from selling carbon credits than selling electric cars, is going to be kind of a beneficiary if any of these carbon taxes he is saying should be had on Bitcoin miners come to fruition. And even now already we're seeing, just because of public pressure, that company Greenidge is already buying carbon credits, so it's already working, you know, to his advantage potentially. And then also, in addition to sort of the monetary angle, I think that Elon likes being the sort of savior of mankind. I mean, who wouldn't want to be, right? So he's going to make us a multiplanetary species, and he's going to save us from the carbon crisis and make it really sexy all at the same time, right? So people love him for that, and a lot of people really adore what he's doing. And I think that he's going to take this crisis that he's sort of been part of manufacturing in Bitcoin and Bitcoin's energy use, and kind of use it to the same effect. He's gonna, this is just prognostication on my behalf, but I think in the next 6 months, year, maybe sooner, who knows, he's probably gonna roll out he'll do one of his stage talks, maybe he'll just blast it on Twitter, that they're gonna be integrating Bitcoin mining with their solar arrays and their power walls, and it's gonna create a much more profitable solar array, much more easy to manage, and they'll be able to, you know, make Bitcoin green, and all the crypto people will love him again and give him big hugs, and then all the solar and sustainable energy folks are gonna be like, oh, this is great, because he's gonna say, you know, solar energy is gonna be able to be proliferated at a rate that's like greater than ever before, and he'll be the savior of mankind all over again. So that's kind of my thoughts on this. I think it's just a win-win for Elon. He gets to kind of walk back his Bitcoin investment and all the flack he's gotten for that from folks, and folks saying that he needs to, you know, maybe his subsidies need to be looked at from the government. So he's walked that back. And at the same time, Tesla stands to gain from carbon taxes on Bitcoin miners, and he gets to be the savior of the world again when he comes out with a big solution to this green mining problem. And so also in the news, a lot's happened since I gave that talk. It was like the 7th of June, so today's July the 2nd, so almost a month ago. Since then, the Bitcoin hash rate has just plummeted, and that's due to China. Like, they've actually cracked down on Bitcoin miners there, and I guess like almost all of the big Bitcoin miners have shut down their operations. It's crazy. So that article that predicted that the United States would overtake China by the end of the year, and I said, I don't think it's going to happen. It's totally going to happen. There's already Chinese folks here trying to find homes for their miners in Texas and other places. There's lots of competition for, you know, finding the cheapest power rates and everything. So it looks like it's going to happen. I don't know if the crackdown will subside and mining will pick back up again in China. You know, China is kind of famous for cracking down and then for whatever optics reasons, and then things kind of go back to status quo after the crackdown's over. But yeah, so very interesting development. I mean, the block time right now for Bitcoin is like 16 minutes. And there's the difficulty adjustment that's coming up to retarget that back to the targeted 10-minute intervals. In a couple of days, they say it's going to be the largest retargeting of the block time, the difficulty rate in the history of Bitcoin. So it's pretty crazy, unprecedented times. And then just yesterday, the Bitcoin Mining Council came out with a document that's really interesting. where they state that the energy mix of Bitcoin globally, they estimate is 56% renewable. So I didn't even know it was that high. And of course, it's the Bitcoin Mining Council, so you can take it with a grain of salt. But even if it's half of that, it's still incredible compared to any other industry on Earth, basically. Definitely compared, I was trying to compare the energy mix of electric cars, which is going to be largely carbon-based into the future. Bitcoin's going to be outperforming electric cars as far as energy mix goes. They are right. It is right now, and it looks like it will be more so in the future. So, two very interesting kind of big data points that have happened since the presentation. And also, I just want to mention that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. A lot of these arguments that I put forward, they aren't original content. These are things put forward in other articles, in the past and that I've picked up, and I'll link some of them below. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.